Hello.
Bob, I'm glad you could make this meeting. I know the scheduling wasn't ideal for you.
It works.
It's just so hard to get everyone.
It is. And my schedule's pretty flexible. I can, I got a project this afternoon and I'll just bump it out a couple hours. So that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, good.
No one will die or anything like that. So I'm not too concerned.
That's definitely good. Yeah, I have no idea how long this is going to take. We'll see.
Okay. Well, you've done some work on the document. You've done a lot of revisions.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure, if it's most of them are like, yeah, they're fine, no big deal, or if we need to discuss one, that will be the kind of the indicator of how long it'll take to go through it all.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, a couple of questions I have, and we'll plow through them, but I don't see anything drastic, so that's good.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, you don't. I guess I didn't realize it until I started going through and seeing some of the edit marks you were making. I'm going, wow, there was a lot of little catches there I didn't see. So
yeah, but I do think it's good if we can just get it all done in one fell swoop. And I mean, I'm sure there will be corrections and whatever down the road as we work through this. But I think it'll be nice to have as much as possible done. We'll see.
Absolutely.
I think we're going to, well, we have 1 more minute and we obviously need Administrator Langrick to be on the call before we start.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Marty.
Hey, Marty.
Kind of a yucky day.
Right? Dreary, but we need rain. So
yeah,
we want mushrooms to come. We need rain, and I very much want the mushrooms to start popping pretty soon.
They didn't last year. It was a terrible.
I know it was. I mean, like we got screwed in the pandemic, and then then it was terrible weather for mushrooms. It was horrible.
Double hit. Melissa?
Yeah.
Are you going to do, can you do shared screen?
I'm going to have Administrator Langrick do that because
then
he will be able to make changes to the document as we go too.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yep. So I chose to do it instead of doing strike through. I chose to do it where it pulls it out just because I have a hard time reading when there's all that strike through language stuck in the middle of paragraphs.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
But we, and when we bring it before the full board, I don't know how we can change the format then, but I thought for our purposes, I would leave it that way. All right, it's 1 o'clock and I believe we have a quorum. There are 4 of us here, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. Hold on 1 moment while I get my agenda back up here. All right, was it properly notified, Administrator Langrick? Oh, you're muted. But actually, he sent me a picture of it being posted on the board, so I know it was properly posted.
Posted, Madam Chair. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. All right, we have a 9-point agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Bob. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Frank, second by Brewer. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we have an agenda. All right, so I thought the first thing that I would do is, so we are reviewing the employee handbook and all the addenda that go with that. I think before we make any motions or do any action, I think that let's just look at the document and talk about the document, so we don't have to try to do amendments to motions or anything like that. I think if possible, it would be nice to approve the document as a whole with whatever changes we make right now, and send that on instead of trying to amend each piece individually, make a motion on each piece individually. So that's what I was thinking. And I think the first thing I'd like to do, though, is turn it over to Administrator Langrick to see if there are any issues, problems, or things blaringly that I missed in going through these that should be added or changed right now before we start having the discussion with all of us supervisors.
Before we go into that, Madam Chair, I don't know if we did we take action on previous
Oh,
minutes?
the minutes. I'm sorry. Yep. Agenda item 4, minutes from the previous meeting. I'm sorry. I skipped right over that. All right.
Okay.
Did everyone have a chance to look at those?
Move for approval.
All right. Motion by Brewer, second.
Bob will do it.
All right. Second by Frank.
I wasn't there, so.
Any discussion on the minutes? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. Sorry, thank you for that reminder. Okay, so let's move back into number 5. And Administrator Langrick, if you would like to share the screen, and then if you have any comments, concerns, questions right off the bat, I think we'll start with you, and then we'll go into each supervisor.
Mr. Langrick, you're muted.
Madam Chair, did you envision going through it by section, or how did you want to approach?
So I guess,
Hello,
yes, is that Don?
this is, yes, I'm calling you by telephone. I'm sorry to bother you, but I had a little trouble getting through.
Okay, well, welcome, thank you.
Now, do I have to put my, do I just have to sit here to keep my mouth shut and not do any heavy breathing?
Yes, if you would like to mute, I believe it's *6, but if you would like to refrain from breathing into the phone, you don't need to mute.
Okay, I won't breathe into the phone. I don't
Okay.
want to be reprimanded. Thank
Thank
you,
Yeah,
Madam Chair.
all right. All right, Mr. Langrick, I guess just off the top of your head, is there anything in here that you thought was glaringly wrong or something that's missed, or would you rather just bring those points up as we move through the document?
Preferring and moving through the document, please keep in
Okay.
mind that there's a lot of items that I may have not encountered that we've had to apply to a situation. So having the past practice to kind of review and say, yes, that's what we're doing remains a challenge to me.
Okay, so why don't we just move through the document? And I guess the only thing, supervisors, that if there is something that I did not change, that you noticed, you'll just have to, because Mr. Langrick is going to page through and obviously stop at the places where I made changes. But if there are other places that he goes past, please feel free to ask him to go back. So with that, why don't you go ahead and, I mean, I think we can just hit each point, and if anyone has an objection or thinks something should change, please speak up. Does that seem reasonable?
Definitely.
Okay, so I will say that the extent of the handbook section was difficult for me because I wasn't quite sure what role finance and personnel needs to take. My reaction to it was that we will let Administrator Langrick handle many things, but that really the buck stops with the Finance and Personnel Committee and then of course the board. So I was trying to sort of make sure that's clear in this document, but I guess I need to know from the committee and Administrator Langrick how much power do we leave with finance and personnel over employee matters? Or, you know, that most of the, I'm assuming, my understanding is most of the day today, we want Administrator Langrick to be able to handle on his own, and it would be more of a reporting to the finance committee what's happening, rather than asking for their permission to do things. But I guess I need to know from other, and Chair Brewer, I would definitely be interested in your comments on this as to what we envision the role of finance and personnel being with employers.
All right, so hearing none. So here's, so the review of this I thought was really good. A lot of the language just changed from clerk to county administrator. I think there's a few places, and I did not highlight them. I just want to make sure that it does say county administrator. I thought I saw a couple places where it just said administrator. So I want to scan back to that.
I tried to be consistent, but you're right. There are places where I may have missed.
Right, and that's not a big deal as something to scan through, but overall, I think it was good. The position for the personnel and finance, there is a paragraph on there that terminations. It's on page 23. Talks about terminations coming before the personnel and finance, and I think that's important. I also think it's important that the personnel and finance is the appeal process for that employee or for that person. So I think both of those are very important. So anytime there's a termination, I think it should be reported to the county, to the personnel and finance. I think they should know what's going on. I think constituents will ask questions, and whether they can say anything or not might be another topic. But there will be cases guaranteed where someone is let go, and there may be a payout for whatever reason or another, and that's going to have to go through personnel and finance. So those things will have to be reported through. So page 23 mentioned that, and also having personnel finance as a final appeal. I'm trying to see where it was.
Yeah, it was in the closed session, talking about having a closed session for if an employee is terminated.
I'm sorry, it was on page 23 of, yeah, so that Melissa's comment right there added this sentence. Whoop, it just went away. And my 23 I shouldn't say it was.
I did want to insert here, I believe this section 8, wasn't this entirely revised with our new policy on, or procedure on reporting grievances? I think we just did that in February on the county board. Is that correct, Mr. Langrick?
Oh.
So we do have an added now standalone policy for reporting concerns of mismanagement.
Is that, I guess I was under the impression that was replacing this, which was rather vague, or is it, you're saying it's a standalone?
That is the intentions, is to eventually pull this section out of the handbook and have that as our, pointing to that as how we're going to handle concerns and reported mismanagement.
So are we able to delete it now, or you think it should stay in here for now and be deleted at a later date?
I think it could be taken out now.
Okay. All right. So we kind of skipped a whole bunch of pages, but let's just finish on this page then while we're at it. So So essentially number 8 is going to be completely, or what we should leave number 8 and it should say, please see policy, whatever it's called.
And what is that policy? Is there a
So,
name on that?
Bob, if
Number?
you go into the county board, I think for February, it was item number 27.
Thank you. I remember talking about that, but I didn't remember if it talked about individual employees and their ability to.
Yeah, I don't remember that either, actually.
Yeah, and that's my concern, is not just mismanagement, but that it's so I want to look at that.
I mean, we started out talking about terminations and closed sessions, and this doesn't specifically talk about termination. So,
Boy, Clint, you're quick.
so this policy has been, we approved it, right?
We did, but I'm realizing I don't know that it has that language that number 8 does about
Right.
appealing your termination.
That was my thought.
This document does not have like an appeal for your termination. We would cover that actually with our written policy, of which we can pull that up in just a second here.
We have a separate grievance policy. Does it make sense to have these separated and not just all in one document, or?
I guess I visualize in a long-term type of a plan that we have, that rather than having like one PDF or Word document to capture these things, we have them stored on a website where we have our references.
Right.
That's kind of what we have began already in our
Right.
our Richland County employee information page. Other items are stored on the administrator website. So we have our, where is our
Write down discipline grievance policy.
there we go. So this is our grievance policy that we would have regarding separation.
Okay.
I do remember some of this, yeah.
So,
And there's step 2 is appeal to
Chair.
finance. Yeah.
Madam Chair.
yes, Don.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Before you move on, after you feel you're done with this, could I ask a question or two?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So the concerns section, so there's actually a different section that talks about, so number 5 talks about discipline, suspension, dismissal of an employee. That's a different section above. And then number 8 is concerns when an employee has a concern, and it does not specify a concern about being fired. So I do think that the grievance policy and what was the first policy you were talking about that we just approved in February?
It's a formal complaint and mismanagement.
Yeah, I think that number 8 actually does that is accurate. Because even in this paragraph under 8, second to last paragraph says concerns involving discipline or terminations follow the discipline termination grievance policy. Concerns in workplace safety follow the workplace safety grievance policy. So I think we can just add, not delete it, but just add one that says concerns. If an employee is, concerned with, then we can just add a sentence that talks about that new policy we just made and delete all the rest of the text. Does that make sense?
Yes. Am I muted? Yeah, that does.
Sorry.
I like the separation of the policies. Clint is right. That's a good way to do it. It's easier to find stuff, and it's also easier to make changes an individual ones. So,
right, but then it's
I
nice
didn't-
to also have it referenced in this policy.
Absolutely.
To know where to go.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so I would say delete from after concerns, the bolded line, you can delete a concern in quotes, that whole paragraph, the next paragraph. Everything down to the decision of the finance and personnel shall be final can be deleted, and you can add a sentence that says concerns involving or a claim by an employee that the county has not complied with the policies should see whatever the name of that policy was. You got all that, Clint?
Thanks, Clint.
Got it. I think I got it. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I mean, it's so hard to do this,
Nope. There's no other way to do it. So please continue
right?
on.
I mean, I think we just got to muddle through. Okay, so can we go back up to the beginning though, and just make sure that we are, I really think we need to talk a little bit about the extent of the handbook section. Clint, do you have thoughts on how you feel, where your authority would defer to finance and personnel? Would it just be after, if there's a real serious issue? Is it more that you would be reporting to finance and just keeping them informed? Or at what point, are you asking for their permission or, their permission to do whatever it is?
In regards to the actions on it, you can assign the administrator in charge of those folks. I think there's going to be naturally some type of items that are going to have to come to you folks. I'm thinking in context of if we have issues regarding elected officials, folks from offices of elected officials, that by your committee structure document and saying that like a finance and personnel is in charge of coordinating between elected officials' offices and being their supervisory committee, that we'll have to have part of that included into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so do you think the way this is currently worded captures that?
I mean, I think so.
It's essentially the second paragraph, that we're really talking about here. That says the county administrator shall have the authority to administer and manage county personnel. Department heads have the authority to issue blah, 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 blah. And then that last sentence, the finance and personnel shall have final jurisdiction over all personnel matters relating to county employees, which are dealt with in this handbook. Kind of that's the buck stops with them kind of language.
Yes, and I would see that in probably 95, 98% of cases, the administrator and elected officials are going to be on the same base. If we reach situations where we're not, then we would be coming before you folks to help sort out what the right answer looks like.
Right, and that's exactly kind of what I was envisioning when I wrote that. So as long as we all feel that captures what our intent, what we intend, I'm fine, unless someone has a suggestion on how to reword that in a way that might be clearer. I'm not sure.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Chair Brewer.
you asked me a question
I just wanted to know,
15 minutes
as
ago.
chair.
What was your question again, please?
Yeah. So as chair of the board, and how do you envision how do you envision finance and personnel relinquishing some of the control that committee has on how we how we handle employee issues and relations, I guess?
Yeah, yes, and it's a good question. And what we were trying to do, establishing the administrator, was streamline our process, make it more efficient, make it quicker perhaps to respond to certain situations rather than typical county fashion. First we have 4 or 5 meetings, then we
Right.
come up with maybe a solution. So and to do that, you've got to have a guy in charge, and that's the administrator. But as
Okay.
long as there are safeguards in there and final solutions that still refer back to finance and personnel, I see no problem with how we've written it here.
Good. I mean, one thing I do want to make sure it's clear with our employees is that we expect that they will work with and through the administrator for most things, and that if things don't go their way, they aren't running to a committee to try to get what they want. When the administrator, so I want to make it clear that that yes, there is an appeal process. Yes, we have, the county administrator reports to and is accountable to the committees and the board. So if there is something truly that they disagree with the county administrator's decision, that they have an avenue for dealing with that. But I also I want to make it clear that we expect that the employees should be working with and through the administrator to resolve issues. So
Yes.
that's another thing I was trying to make clear with this paragraph. Okay, so are we good with the way it's written? Should we move on?
I'm
I like
good.
it. I like
Okay.
it.
So then we get down to, I mean, I think we just move on into, I mean, we're satisfied with that entire section. Then there was a few other little minor things that the county administrator who reports to the finance committee on page 7. I mean, I think all of that runs along the same lines. So if we're all satisfied with that, I think we'll move on then. And let's see. So on the bottom of page 9, I think all I did was change administrator from clerk.
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes, Mr. Steep?
is this an appropriate time for my 2 questions, or shall we move on?
Oh, is it about the first part we were just talking about with finance and personnel?
Yes, but
Yeah,
this
please go
agenda
ahead.
item.
Yeah, please go ahead.
You want to keep going?
No, you can go ahead and ask your questions.
Okay. One question is, it's just sort of at a practical level, the business of all employees, the termination of all employees will have to be approved by the finance committee, or at least reviewed and approved. Now, are you talking about all employees, or are you just talking about department heads?
Administrator Langford, do you have it? I guess I don't have I mean, I feel that the county administrator oversees the department heads who oversee all the employees, and that he, at the very
Yes.
least, be informed and could offer advice. I think we say that in a paragraph somewhere, that he would offer,
Yeah.
that they would consult with the county administrator before terminating to,
So you have 3 divisions that have significant authority in their administration. That's the Pine Valley Manor, the Director of Human Services, and the Highway Department. Would they not have the authority to terminate their own employees?
so that's back down under 23. Okay, so now we're back down on page 23.
Okay, well, let me go to my other question then. If I might, we can get to that question. The other question I have is, suppose I'm a department manager. If I want to terminate an employee, I need to go to finance and personnel with my request in my case. Is that right?
I don't.
Or do I go to Clint?
I don't think the department heads don't go to finance to terminate employees now, do they?
Then
I don't know the answer to that question because I don't think I've been.
Madam Chair, this is Sean, if I can answer that question.
Sure, if you know the answer.
They do come to us right now.
They do. Is after it's
these-
done though, just to report that it's been done?
No, it might even be earlier on than that. I'd have to look it up, but this would, I think, let's see, there was one example was when Ms. Kleiss came, she was talking about letting an employee go that was on probation. And there was she had to inform us, or
But it was
there was something like that. So I'm pretty sure that the idea was to change this eventually, but changes have never been made yet.
so in that circumstance, she had already let that person go. She was simply informing the committee.
Yeah, and that's
During
because that was in
probation.
our employee handbook. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, it was because that person was still in probation. She had let them go and then informed us that she let them go. I'm not sure. So, Mr. Langford, did you have something you wanted to say?
Madam Chair?
Yes, that's what I was.
That's what you were going to say?
That that position was in a probationary period.
Madam Chair, the distinction there is, and Stacy made it at that time, is Finance and Personnel is my committee, the committee that I report to normally. I don't think she came to us because she was terminating. She was merely telling her committee what was going on.
No, Stacy Kleister, she reports to LEJC,
LEJC.
Yes. Oh, excuse me.
not finance.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Our current language would say the department head shall not have the authority to terminate a non-probationary employee. All terminations must be presented to the Finance and Personnel Committee for review and final approval. Prior to a termination, the Finance and Personnel Committee shall ensure that the affected employee is given written notice that termination of the employee has been proposed and the reasons therefore, and it goes on. So that's our current language.
And this is language that I changed in this document, correct?
Pages that on.
So if you go to page 23,
Got it.
if you go to item D, it says the department head shall not have the authority to terminate a non-probationary
There it is,
employee.
yeah.
All terminations must be presented to the county administrator for review and final approval.
Right.
Prior to termination, the county administrator shall ensure that the affected employee is given written notice. The employee shall have written notice in accordance with open meeting laws. As to the time, date, and I still have the Finance and Personnel Committee language in there, but I have a comment saying, are we deleting this? But I do believe that when someone is terminated, they do probably have a right to have a meeting. So yeah, right there, that's part D, right, is the part in question. Oops, went too far. There it is. So
Can I just interject though? Is this still this is part 7 on the employee handbook, right?
this is part 5 of the employee
5.
handbook. Well, wait, well,
Oh, no, you're right.
under
Okay.
hiring and employment considerations, it's item 5.
Okay.
And it starts on page 22, and then on 23, the paragraph that we are discussed that is on the table right now is D, where it says the department head shall not have the authority to terminate a non-probationary employee. All terminations must be presented to the county administrator for review and final approval. And I have a comment in there. Are we deleting this? Will we have a finance closed meeting session? ? So I guess why don't we just sit here and hash through this, because this is probably going to take up the
Coming
most.
back.
How do we feel? I mean, what do we want the employee to be able to have? Does the employee have the right to present their case to the finance meeting, the finance committee? Is that
Yeah, I would say that as part of an appeal process, they could, and that's spelled out in the other document we just talked about, the grievance policy.
Madam Chair, if I can add to the complexity, and this is something I should have caught prior, is that we had previous action that we took to set up our management and authorities policy that we put in place as kind of a reference of where we're pointing to on how we wanted to move forward with such projects. Underneath that document, we'd kind of set precedents that we want the authorities and responsibilities of management to include to be able to hire, promote, schedule, transfer, and assign employees, as well as to discharge employees or take corrective and disciplinary action, except as by state statute or federal regulations. And so that was put forward in a previous policy on the authority of management, roles of members and chairs. Now that still leaves, I mean, we're saying that goes to management. So how we want to kind of define what is management and who that, where that buck stops, there may be some debate amongst that.
would it be appropriate to say in this case that basically part D would say the department head shall not have the authority to terminate. All terminations must be presented to the county administrator for review and final approval, and just end it there, and then have another bulleted point that says that if an employee wishes to have, then we would follow the grievance process or whatever, and they could have, then it would go to the committee level and have a closed session about it. Because that's what you basically, if we're trying to streamline, we want to be able to terminate them when we need to terminate them without having to wait for all these committee meetings. Is that correct?
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Hold on one second. Can I just get a feel for if that's what the committee is thinking right now?
That's my thought, exactly, so.
I agree. That's the vision I had as you were going through this.
Okay. Mr. Seep,
Madam
what was your
Chair.
comment? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Seep.
Just one practical question.
Uh-huh.
Are we saying that no employee can be terminated without the approval of the administrator?
Yes, that's what we're saying.
That's good. If the administrator approves it, it's up to his discretion as to whether or not he needs legal counsel or further consultation with a finance committee or whatever, depending upon the situation, I would think.
Well, I think that we, I believe that Mr. Langrick would not allow a termination unless he has followed those steps, and I don't know that those steps would need to be.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree. I'm not implying anything different. There are some department heads that and of course that's in our policy, I think, that the administrator does not have the authority to fire. Is that correct?
So our county administrator does not have the authority to fire department heads who are elected officials, but their employees are county employees, and therefore I assume he would have the authority to fire them, but why would he be doing that unless the elected official was asking him permission?
I guess there is a couple exceptions in the statute. One would be the chief deputy of the sheriff's department, who is appointed by the sheriff per statute, and the sheriff can let them go. So I know that one is for sure one case, but other than that, I don't think there's many.
Right. Mr. Langridge, you have a comment?
There are two or three that are of that exception.
Right, and we're not. I mean, obviously, if he's not allowed to do that, he wouldn't do that. So, I guess I'm a little unclear. What are you concerned that? What is your concern, Mr. Seep?
Well, I don't have any concern. I just want to know what the policy is.
Okay, all right. So
I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Minister Langrick, do you see any issue with us essentially at Part D, keeping the first two sentences and deleting the rest of that paragraph? Just deleting, starting with prior to termination, just deleting all of that. And then we could add a bulleted point that says that an employee who is terminated may appeal to, and whatever policy we have, you would write down whatever, insert whatever policy we have for that.
That could be added to Part E, where it says, should an employee decide to file a grievance? And then it could state something about would have the right to go before the Finance and Personnel Committee or something along those lines.
Or just follow that policy that's existing.
Yeah, the grievance, I believe,
includes
doesn't.
that.
It might say they can go before the committee. So, all right. So we made a decision. We are going to delete from prior, all of the bolded, everything in bold would be deleted. And let's at this point, let's leave E alone, because I'm going to assume that grievance policy says that they do have the right to go before Finance and Personnel and the county board to appeal.
So if we can go back to Clint's question on the managers having that authority to hire and fire, what was that policy again? Are we contradicting ourselves, it looks like?
No, I don't think so, because I think what we were trying to do with that document was establish who are the layers of management. So in this case, instead of having to go through the committee process as a management level, we're stopping with the county administrator. So it's essentially the department heads working with the county administrator to terminate an employee.
Right. So the authority and responsibilities of management include hire, promote, schedule, transfer, layoff, or recall. Okay, it doesn't say Oh, discharge employees. There it is. Thank you. Discharge our employees. So we are giving them, in this document, we are giving them permission to discharge employees or take corrective disciplinary action. And in the other handbook policy, we are not.
So you're saying because in that document, you mean the department heads are the managers, and so by adding the step of reporting to the county administrator, that's contradictory?
Yeah, because here it says the department head shall not have the authority, and the other one it says managers do. Are managers department heads?
It's unclear to me what
Yeah, me
how we are
too.
defining management in that other document. And that other document is county board policy, but that's not in a document that employees are ever going to read.
I think that, I mean, however it reads here, whether you say the department head shall have the authority or shall not have the authority, it's still coming down to an approval from a county administrator position for review and final action. So
True.
if that is changed to say that they shall have the authority, that kind of matches more in line with what we wanted to have for management authorities. It really is kind of coming down to fill in the gap of how you want to interpret the concept of management as it relates to terminations here.
And I don't think it's a bad thing for department heads to be, anytime we're terminating an employee, I don't think it's a bad thing to have, you know, I think the department heads would want to have the backup of the county administrator to make sure that they've dotted all their I's and crossed, you know, all their T's. So, I mean, we could change that sentence to say the department head shall have the authority to terminate a non-probationary employee, but all terminations must be presented to the county administrator for review and final approval. I mean, I guess maybe that implies more of the department head working with the county administrator, but they still are able to do it.
I like that. I think that
Me
this
too.
just points to the fact that the county administrator also has some of those HR responsibilities that we've talked about. I mean, you would have this in a business if you were
Right.
terminating someone.
Right. Okay.
Madam
So,
Chair,
yes, Mr. Steven.
I think that's very good. Just as an example, about 3 years ago, we had a department head who terminated an employee without going through the procedure. Then you had to go to finance and personnel. As a consequence, the county had a tremendous liability of over $20,000 in legal fees and a lot of other costs. So I think this is very good that they're subject to approval and review by the administrator.
Okay. All right. So Administrator Langrick, that sentence is now going to read, the department head shall have the authority to terminate a non-probationary employee. All terminations must be presented to the county administrator for review and final approval. And delete the rest of that paragraph. And then I think we're done with that section.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Brewer.
All right, and I don't mean to complicate this even further, but does it depend on what the committee, how the committee is formed? For instance, HHS is a board. The committee is a board. The highway committee are elected to those posts. Does that give them any more authority or less authority to approve dismissals, etc., than other committees?
That's a really good question. And actually, I had that question in one of my comments in this document because it is unclear to me. I guess what I thought what might happen is we might go through, make these changes, but then we can run them through those boards to see if there's any conflicts. Mr. Glanger, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think that would be a good approach to it, of putting it together and then piecing it out and saying, hey, this is what the changes we're going to make it. Does this go against kind of what you had in mind? There's always going to be our interesting partnerships as well with like a Simon Center and economic development. Economic development only having one employee right now is not, but like a Simon Center where we're working with across with partner entities, it kind of also adds to the complication where they kind of respond directly to a board versus through an administrator. So there are challenges yet.
Right. All right. So let's approach it where we make these changes, and then I think maybe what makes the most sense is before this document goes on to finance and personnel, that Mr. Langrick, you may want to send it to the department heads of and see if they see any conflicts with how the rules and statutes that govern their committees and boards, to see if there's any conflicts with it. That might be because they know better than anyone probably what all those little minutia of rules for different boards and commissions that we have on this in the county.
Madam Chair, I think that's an excellent idea, and I would really, really like to hear Tracy Thorson's take on this because of her experience in other counties. And she was actually the first department head who warned us as members of her board that there are changes coming now with the administrator, so I want you to consider them. And so she knows, perhaps more than any of us, what these changes mean.
Okay. Yeah, I think that seems like a really logical next step would be to send this out. And then we can, from there, it can go to finance with any kind of revisions that needed to be made because of conflicts. So, all right. So I guess we should back up again and see just to make sure that there's nothing else that we need to have further in-depth conversations about. So I think we left off on page 9. And one question I had is, I wasn't sure, are you, Mr. Langrick, do you handle any kind of workers' comp claims and things like that? Is that handled through your office? So that would be changed from the clerk to the administrator?
It's reported up through right now, Tammy with payroll and benefit specialist handles kind of getting the
and that's
on.
So that's your office. Okay. All right. So that change is correct. Leave of absences. So I did take out finance and personnel there and just replaced it with county administrator. Does anyone have any issues with that?
No.
Okay. Flexible, same thing with flexible work schedule. Performance evaluations, we know that we want the county administrator doing those.
So there's that one, if you go back to item 8, all leaves and absence shall be reported to the administrator's office. Here again, do we want to go county administrator to clarify?
Yeah, I'll change everything without it.
Okay, it's just
no, I agree, because when we get to the Pine Valley one, so the Pine
Valley
document has so I went through and tried to catch all of them and changed it to Pine Valley administrator versus county administrator. So we'll make sure that change gets done. So on 9, I added some language there about informing the supervising committee about flexible work schedules, and that doesn't have to be in there. It had the supervising committees being approving it, but I thought I would just change it to informing the supervising committee if the county administrator approves it. So I don't know if that's something that's a big deal to anybody or if that's how we want to handle it. I mean, one would assume, and I think this is a proper assumption, is that the county, anytime anything major is happening, he's going to let us know. I mean, if he's going to, at the very least, finance is going to hear about it, but in all likelihood, the supervising or formerly supervising committee, is going to hear about it as well. It's not like we're giving him, we're going to let him just do all these things and we're never going to know what's going on. Presumably he's been so good about informing us all. So that's why I was comfortable making these changes.
I do think it's good to have that language in there, though, recognizing that we may not always have an administrator as conscientious as Clint. You always have to prepare for the appropriate language in there.
So in this case, the department head can agree with the employee, but they also have to report that to the administrator, so the administrator can then inform the supervising committee?
Are you talking about the flexible work schedule?
Yes.
In the event it is the department head requesting the county administrator must approve and inform the supervising committee. So So we're giving the department head the ability to approve a flexible work schedule for an employee
But then
without
they have to,
telling
ahead.
anybody.
right,
The
but then
only-
don't they have to report that to the county administrator, so,
No, that first sentence says that that the department head is allowed to do that, period. It's when it's a department head wanting a flexible schedule, then
Oh.
they have to the county administrator and inform their supervising committee.
oh, it is a department head now. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for
Yep.
the clarification.
Yep. Okay. So performance evaluations, and maybe I deleted the supervising committee, but maybe we do want language in here that, because I do think it's important that performance evaluations, certainly of department heads, would be reported to the supervising committee and or the finance committee.
Absolutely.
So we could add language. So after that first sentence, we could just extend it to say, and inform the supervising committee, which it would either be finance for some department heads, or it would be, whatever committee is their oversight committee. So in number 11, the first sentence would read, the county administrator shall conduct annual performance evaluations of the director, department head, commissioner, exception, elected county officials, and inform the supervising committee.
Yeah.
Okay, you got
Agree.
that, Mr. Langrick? All right, so then if we keep going, I didn't have anything to air. Just on top of page 12, there's just adding that it's the administrator's office where we keep this stuff now, not the clerks, although they're in the same place as they always were. And then we skip quite a few pages until we get to the top of page 15. Compensatory time shall be reported to the county administrator's office. Same thing with overtime.
Which is just as part of payroll anyway, correct? Is that how it's, okay.
And sick leave, our payroll person is now in the administrator's office, so that's tucked into the county administrator's office. And so let's see, on page 16, talking about what, sick leave? Oh, sick leave, I just changed it to administrator. Voluntary sick leave donation, again, administrator's approval. And the county administrator is going to maintain our records for this policy, vacation time. So all of that seemed pretty straightforward. Same thing with family and medical leave on the bottom of page 17. And then rules of conduct. So, I guess towards the bottom of page 19, if you're being harassed, would report to the county administrator. Complaints would be investigated. That all seems to make sense. Same thing with towards the bottom of page 20. Anything kind of threat or acts of violence would be reported to the county administrator. That all makes sense. Okay, so hiring. I think that this is what we want. We have already kind of had this discussion, but this is basically the department heads, would be working with the county administrator to hire open positions.
Right.
So I don't know if anyone has any issues with any of that language.
No, pretty much most of it is just transition it either from the personnel or from the clerk. So that's
right. Yeah. It's transferring the supervising. I don't know if we want to have any language in here about informing the supervising departments or committee. I'm sorry. Presumably these are positions that are that are budgeted they're open positions that are in the budget. These are not creating new positions. This is hiring for vacancies longer than 90 days. So obviously it's a position. So, you know, if it was a new position, then that's a different story. And that's something that would absolutely have to go through finance and through the county board, but this is not that. So, so I think that what we
yeah, unless we
want-
put unless there was a hiring freeze of some sort.
which, right, but then we would have language for that. Free,
yeah, and then the county administrator would know about that and be able, and
right.
so.
What was your question, Melissa, on what should be informed?
I was just saying, you know, do we want to include language saying that that when they are hiring, the supervising committee would be informed? Because just like we were talking about
Maybe
earlier.
should be.
Yeah, I personally think that would be a good idea. I mean, for example, HHS already does that for us, but without that language, you know, if you have administration that's not as conscientious, you could have a board that's largely uninformed of the hirings and firings that are happening.
Very true.
So, I'm just trying to figure out which is the most appropriate place to add that language. Probably at the very beginning, just say that, let's see, the department head shall immediately notify the county administrator in case of a vacancy in the department head position. The county administrator shall perform the hiring steps with the department head that the department head would otherwise do.
And contact the.
And inform the supervising committee.
Sure. Because that way, if the meeting's 3 weeks away, the work can still be done for the hiring.
Right.
Get
I
the
mean, I think
process
what we're
started.
gonna
We're
do,
not
we
dragging
don't
our
want to
feet.
hold up the hiring by having to ask the,
Right. It's just advisory. It's just.
and then they work and getting it and then inform them. So I guess under A, we could just add that sentence, write a sentence that says, or to inform. And inform supervisor, I guess that makes, in case of vacancy in a department head position, the county administrator shall perform the hiring steps the department would otherwise do, and as a committee.
Yeah. You were breaking up there for a bit, Melissa, but you're back.
Sound good?
I like it.
So hiring temporary vacancies, we can do, a county administrator may hire a limited term employer on an emergency basis. Shall be written, since this paragraph shall be paid.
Is there any chance you would want to just put it in the very beginning paragraph
I'm
before
sorry,
you
cut
get
out.
into steps so that all of the subsequent things are covered? Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So Ingrid, your audio is cutting out
Bob,
a
you
little bit.
can hear me?
I can hear you. Melissa was cutting out for a minute there. I'm
I
not
think
sure.
it might be your internet connection, Melissa.
Yeah, you're circling again, Melissa, and you just went out.
Is it me?
Yes. My question was just if it would be
so can you-
appropriate to put a sentence. Now we can.
Going for the phone. We're getting some regular pauses from you, Melissa, and then we see you
Yeah, I'm gonna
standing in
call
your
in.
door,
Hold
and then
on.
we see you sitting in front of the desk. All right, that's fine. So Ingrid, you think of making it as part of the steps? I know. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. So I was just wondering if it was appropriate rather than having to maybe address this in every step, say hiring, because then it talks about hiring for temporary vacancies and then probationary period and then disciplinary. I was wondering if in the introductory paragraph, it made sense to include a sentence about it.
Oh.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
Sorry.
There is echoing, so you'll probably need to.
Yeah, I just
Yeah, I
muted
just muted my
iPad, but
it's.
hold on a second.
Hold on.
I look forward to real meetings.
Oh my goodness. Oh my God.
Mr. Langreck, what do you think of my idea there? I don't know if you caught what I was saying.
Where would it
You're a
go?
little broken there, Supervisor Glassbrenner. Was that addressed to me?
Yes, I apologize. Can you hear me?
You're coming in broken, but I think I can make it out. Can I be stated again?
Okay, let me try that again. I was just wondering what you thought of my question of whether to insert that in the introductory paragraph.
I would be inserting that the committee would be notified of a hire or a
although
fire.
as I'm looking at it, maybe it includes steps where that wouldn't make sense. So look at it again.
Well, if we leave it in A, that does cover anything that is any vacancy or anything that's got to be filled.
In A, I mean, that's all in reference to the department head position, and that's what we're after, is informing the supervisory committee when we're filling a department head position, or is it when we're filling any position?
I think it was
For
any
notification.
position.
So my question then was in the introductory. So right under where it says hiring and employment considerations, I was wondering if it made sense to include the language there versus in each step, but I'm not sure that that makes sense. I'm asking for input. Did we lose Melissa entirely?
I'm not seeing her on the list, so she may have logged off in efforts to try to log back on. In reference to your question, yes, we could add it to that initial paragraph of something saying that through the hiring process, it's expected that the supervisory committee is going to be informed on actions or something of that nature.
Yeah, correct. Because we also get into like dismissals, which again, it's useful for some of the boards to to know what the turnover is or who's getting dismissed, that kind of thing. Which, like I said, for example, I mean, I sit on HHS board. They're very good about preparing a whole paper that lists each of those things. But it's good to have provisionary language for that, I think.
Yeah, I think that cleans up how it reads.
Who's our vice chair in this situation? Isn't it Dave Turk, and he's not here, is he?
I defer to the county board chair.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. My thought on this whole discussion is that I don't want to see the importance of committees diminished too much. I like the fact that the work of the county board is accomplished through committees. And part and parcel of that is the hiring and promotion and I suppose firing and interviewing of potential county employees. I like that part of it, and I want to see that continue.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm back. My computer is completely freaking out, or my iPad. Actually, I tried my iPad and then my laptop, and they're both freaking out. So anyway, so I'll be on the phone for a little while until I get that figured out. But I can follow along. I have the documents here, so I can follow along as we go. So I don't know what all you guys were just talking about, but where are we at?
Well, I would like to ask Mr. Brewer to clarify. So are you saying that including language of informing committees on decisions is not enough inclusion of them in the process?
I would say that's true.
So do you have a proposal then for how we should address?
Nope.
Or...
I don't have a proposal because I don't have the language in front of me.
So do the committees currently hire people?
The committees can accomplish, they don't hire, but they do interviews, Bob,
Right.
LAJC, we did interviews, and I like that part of the committees.
So
Do
Melissa,
you like that, Marty? Because I always feel like that's sort of a waste of time. That
You
they
do?
hire who they want to hire, regardless of what we say.
Well, now, wait a minute.
Well, I mean, I don't know. The
She
last
kind of has
3
a point,
times the
Mr.
sheriff has
Brewer.
not hired who we've recommended.
We usually only come in on the very last interview, which is pretty much a formality at that point.
Right.
Right.
I don't know, I like that part of it, but maybe I thought they listened to us,
Maybe they do. Maybe we're cynical.
You can always say, I told you so if it doesn't work out, right?
I think you guys are cynical, yes, you ladies are cynical.
So Melissa, to update you, I had been mentioning that perhaps the language to inform committees on hiring and firing and etc. could be in this where he's at right now, that paragraph, right under hiring and employment considerations, where it just describes what we're doing rather than putting it into each step.
That makes sense.
But then Mr. Brewer was mentioning that he feels that we should not diminish the role of committees in the process. So
Well,
that's why we got to that discussion.
Not totally diminished, anyway.
Well, I just was reading so there's an actual ordinance instructing the sheriff's department that they can't hire without going through their committee. So that ordinance would have to be changed. That's the only one I know about, that it's actually an ordinance they're following when they. But I do feel like that process adds a lot of steps that are potentially unnecessary.
I'm not sure of this, Melissa, but I'll bet the highway committee also has the same language someplace, because that committee is always involved in the hiring of people at the county shop.
Okay. Well, maybe that is a question that we need to get input from our committee, the department heads with committees that hire through that their hiring process involves their oversight committee.
So can I clarify, Mr. Brewer, are you talking about when we're saying like a department head type of position or any position? Because I guess I would agree. I mean, we just sat through, you were with me on the HHS board when we went through the process of hiring the director there. So, I mean, obviously that required our input. But
Yeah.
So are you speaking in that instance or in every hiring?
Well, I guess it depends on the committee, because, for instance, highway committee, the board or the committee is involved in every hiring. Every hiring is run by that committee.
Which might make sense for them, but in a department like HHS where it's very large, it doesn't really make sense to be a part of every hiring.
So here's a question. So for example, Highway and Pine Valley and HHS all have their own addenda to this handbook.
Yes.
So perhaps and it says, and I believe the language in this document says that the addendum has authority over this document. So we could add that language to their specific, at least, I mean, that doesn't help us. Oh no, the Sheriff's Department has an addenda as well. So we could actually add language to the departments that have either ordinances in place or some sort of rules in place where the committee does need to be involved in the hiring process. We could deal with that within their addenda.
If I can, so historically, the involvement of the committees, I think, they originate with paragraph C, which the department head or designee, and then it said it, and the supervisory committee may interview those applicants who appear from their written applications to be qualified for the job. So I think that was the language that was kind of cued into in doing hires where where committee involvement was had. In moving forward, if there's a desire to still have committee participation, I guess I would, I'd also propose, the thought that perhaps there's involvement from a committee member so that we still have some transparency and knowing that there was input from a committee through that aspect. But having supervisory committees put together for closed sessions and coordinating for public meetings and postings for interviews, in my opinion, is kind of a little bit of a cumbersome. But if that's the direction that we want to go in, if that's the direction that you want to go in, that's acceptable. We would probably want to go back and change a little bit of our management language, though. We do state under there that the authority and responsibilities of management include to hire, promote, transfer, etc. But if that's the direction that the county would like to move in, that is a direction you can go.
So, I mean, I don't think that is the direction we want to go. We're trying to streamline things here, and I know in dealing with the law enforcement committee that having to get the committee together in order to do these interviews, it adds significant time to the whole hiring process, which already is long because we have to post it and all of the other requirements. So, I guess I'm of the feeling that we don't want to have to involve the committees unless there's an overriding ordinance that says we have to until we change that.
So Bob, I would agree. I think there's the overriding ordinance. We need to look at why some of those are in place. And the Sheriff's Department one was there. There's a long history behind it, but basically the elected supervisors have a public input, which I think is important for the public to have an input on law enforcement and some of those decisions to see what's going on. And then they're only selecting, I believe they're passing on 3 to the sheriff to decide from. So they're not actually hiring, they're just part of the interview process and making it very clear and transparent. So I think there are very good reasons for some of these to be done. And I think that's why that one in particular is an ordinance, not just part of the policy.
I think a lot of this stems back to the fact to prevent cronyism, favoritism in the hiring process, the county hiring process.
If I can also go so far as then with paragraph C, with it stating that and the county administrator may interview those, to set the context and to make sure it's not, to understand what the intentions are, do you envision then having the county administrator involved with every interview or as appropriate? Because that would be a lot of time.
As appropriate.
Yeah. As appropriate.
Yeah. I agree. And I agree with what's been said beforehand. I think that the appropriate boards and committees need to be informed of, hires and fires and things like that. But unless we're looking at specific ordinances where it's necessary, I would agree with Melissa that we really need to streamline the process, because if we just go back to what is really our job, we hire an administrator to administrate. County board is there for, policy and guidance and things like that.
Yeah, I would agree. So I guess where does that leave us as far as changes?
I would say this states as is with a provision added to make sure that appropriate committees are informed. And then as far as the ordinances, you said those are potentially covered in those addendums. by the specific committees?
We're going to look at those addendum next, so we can add language in there. All right. Are we ready to move on out of this section? Let's see, what page I can't, my screen is totally froze. What page were you were just talking about
21.
section? Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. All right. So as we get into 22 here,
20.
probation period, granting extensions shall be by the county administrator. It used to say finance and personnel. Receiving the recommendation from the department head. Evaluations of employees during probation is being sent. Do we want, maybe that would be a good place to also have a statement about informing the supervising committee? The written evaluation.
Where are you putting that? Where are you?
So I'm on the third full paragraph on page 22 that begins, department head shall submit to the county administrator a written evaluation of the performance of each employee on probation in the department, and also a recommendation as to whether or not that employee merits the continuation of regular status as a county employee. You could just say the department head shall submit to the county administrator a written evaluation. Let's see, where would be a good place? Continuation of regular status as a county employee, and inform at the end of the sentence, just write and inform the supervising committee.
Yeah, so that means their supervising committee will know who's coming off for probation, basically.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where are we putting the previous, did we decide that we are putting a provision in that introductory paragraph, or are you wanting to address it by numbered points?
So are you talking about, so the introductory paragraph of hiring and employment considerations, that procedures for hiring, promotions, terminations, that paragraph there, right?
Yes, correct.
I mean, we could just write a sentence right there that says, supervising committees will be kept informed of.
Will be notified of hires, fires, and probationary status.
Yes.
Hires, terminations. Not that Clint has anything better to do, but sure.
Well, a lot of that can be put on the particular department.
Department head.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the department heads, we're saying that the department heads would inform.
Correct. Not that this is Clint's job to type all these things up.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so if we put that in that paragraph, you're right, it's still, probation is still covered under this same section, so we wouldn't have to write it anywhere in there.
Covers the whole section.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we already talked about the item number 5, discipline, suspension, and dismissal. So I think we've beat that one to death, right?
I did
number
want to
6.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't know if you're there yet. I did want to readdress something on number 8, which I know we already talked a lot about as well, but I was looking at the resolution for that, and the language at the end of the resolution that discusses this one, which it has the wrong number, but anyways, it says that this policy or procedure, I guess it should state, it's a procedure for county employees to express management concerns. The ending part of the resolution states that that subsection 7 entitled concerns under the heading hiring and employment considerations is repealed, which is actually number 8 in this document. So I don't know where we had gotten with that. I know you guys had mentioned leaving that language in there, but according to that resolution that we passed, that number 8 is completely repealed.
So we should delete the whole thing.
We need to delete the whole thing, and it should have that other resolution or procedure in there instead.
So number 8 would become
Concerns,
colon,
C.
and then just referencing that document.
Right. The procedure for, or I mean, it's actually labeled number 8. It looks like Clint. Now I don't want to speak for you, Clint, but it looks like you intended to just insert that into where number 8 is.
The intent, if memory serves, when we made the filing a formal complaint and reporting mismanagement was to take out the concern section that was put in section 8.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so you'll just replace that with the language that was just approved.
I wouldn't plan on replacing it out of there. I prefer to have a standalone policy outside of the handbook to point to.
So we would completely delete number 8, and there would be no reference to that policy, or do you want to have a reference to that standalone policy in this document?
As we had previously addressed about, to have there the reference from decision of finance personnel to the concerns of other things to point to that is kind of where it may be appropriate to leave that section, just a reference on where you can find it yet in this handbook.
Okay, so we'll still keep this section, but we'll delete all of that other language.
I'm confused. So we're not repealing. I'm confused.
Well,
what
we're
part are
basically
we leaving?
Just the last 2 sentences, and we'll add one other sentence that references this next document.
Okay.
So we're repealing it as it's, I mean, essentially we're repealing it as it's written here, and we're deleting all of this other language, and just the number 8 will just be referencing other documents.
Okay. Sounds good.
If you have concerns, here's the 3 documents that you can turn to, depending on what your concern is.
Makes sense.
Okay.
All right. So number 9, nepotism. All I did was change from county clerk to county administrator. So I did delete one item that was in there, because it was upon receiving facts set forth in paragraph herein, the county clerk shall promptly convey the facts to the chair of the finance committee. I mean, if the administrator is handling this, but I don't know if we still want there to be, if we want the chair of finance and personnel to be informed.
Here again, I think they should be. I think they should be informed. They should know that there's a question or a problem.
Would it be finance and personnel, or would it be the appropriate supervisory committee?
Yeah, the language that was in there before was finance and personnel. It's interesting to me that that's the only place where the chair, it references the chair of a committee being informed. I don't know why that was, if there's some sort of history to that. I mean, I guess the chair of the finance committee used to always be the chair of the board, so I don't know how that got in there or what that means.
Personally, I think it would make more sense for it to be the supervisory committee would be informed. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
Supervisory committee makes sense. I think they should be notified of something like that.
So again, this is still under that same section where that introductory paragraph says that the department heads would inform the supervisory committee or county administrator. So I guess it's still covered under that.
You know, that gets extensive then, because now we're also including
Nepotism.
while we're including nepotism, but also number 8, which is referencing 3 other procedures depending on the type. Now, I do think that some of those concerns, particularly if it's mismanagement, it would make sense that it potentially the supervisory committee gets informed, but maybe you had mentioned in that introductory paragraph that we would specifically state of hiring, termination, and probationary. So that doesn't cover, for example, concerns and nepotism. So I guess if you wanted that sort of
Right.
or in language included, it would probably need to go either in that we'd have to specify in that introductory statement or put it in numbers 8 and 9.
I mean, it wouldn't be hard to just add all the categories listed at the top, just to make sure they're all covered. I guess the question is, are there certain policies that we want to make sure people understand that the supervising committees need to be informed if things are happening? And I can see where, nepotism might be a really important one to make sure as far as transparency. Maybe it's important to make a specific statement in this particular section for purposes of transparency. So I would be okay with adding it in here that the supervising committee. I don't know. Do we think it needs to be the chair of the finance committee, or do we want to just be more generic and say the supervising committee?
Supervising
committee.
I agree.
Yeah, supervisory committee.
Okay, so I'm going to add. So you can undelete what I deleted and just change that language to say, upon receiving the facts set forth in paragraph herein, the county administrator or department head, I guess, shall convey the facts to the supervising committee. I do think we want to be careful about dumping everything onto the lap of the county administrator. I mean, this certainly seems like something that the department head, unless it's the department head who's supervising someone who's related to them, then obviously the county administrator would
have to do it.
Would be the one. Does
Well,
that make sense?
Yeah, but when you say county administrator, I'm thinking of the county administrator and staff. So this is a personnel matter, so it goes through the personnel department.
Right. You're talking about our HR. I mean, essentially our personnel department is Tammy and Clint, right?
Yeah. Well, right now, yes.
Yeah, because our financial positions, they're not HR positions.
Right. Right.
Josh's position is financial, not HR related.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so are we okay with adding that paragraph back in and it would read, upon receiving facts set forth in paragraph herein, the county administrator or department head shall promptly convey the facts to the supervising committee.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Nope.
All right.
I apologize,
All
Madam
right.
Chair. I'm a little bit lost on which section were we on there?
Okay, so we're on policy on nepotism number 9, and I had deleted item C, and so it made the next one C. I had deleted, and it's on the right there. So I think you could just, click on the X to not accept the change, and it should stick it back in there. And then just change the language so that it reads that the county administrator or department head shall promptly convey the facts to the supervising committee. I mean, so if you get down to item H there, I mean, I would certainly be comfortable with the county administrator, being allowed to come up with a reasonable solution on how to handle it. But again, maybe we want to make sure that he is informing the supervising committee. I mean, this document has to go to Finance and Personnel to be approved after this. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot more eyes looking at this. So I don't know that we have to fix every single thing right this second. I think we've had these good conversations. So, but by the time the department heads look at this and it comes into finance, there could be more changes.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so let's move on because it is 2:24. When am I losing you, Marty? Do you have to leave pretty soon?
Well, yeah, I do at 2:45, 3.
Okay, all right. So let's keep. We haven't even gotten to the other documents yet. Hoofda. Maybe we won't do the other ones, and maybe we schedule another meeting do.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is a lot. Obviously,
We've
this is
through
the
a lot.
hardest
That's
one.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now we're into reimbursements. So this one, so employee attendance, so that it's like the 5th or 6th bulleted item there. Employee attendance at training and seminars, lodging expenses are involved that are more than the rate that the county administrator will not approve the cost exceeding the government rate may be attended by the employee. Wait, employee attendance at training and seminars where lodging expenses are involved, which are more than the governmental rate, and where the county administrator will not approve the cost exceeding. Oh, we're just saying that then the employee has to pay the difference.
Right.
So I just changed out supervising committee with administrator. I think that's probably an okay one.
Excellent. Yeah.
Doesn't need to inform. So then we're down to the top of page 26. Other expenses. Again, I feel like this is part of how we're trying to streamline how bills get paid and what happens. So I think having the county administrator. Now, number 6 in this, expense vouchers, and I'm assuming that expense vouchers would still go to accounts payable specialist and in the clerk's office. So I didn't change that. Is that right? Does anybody know?
Correct. Yep, that is correct. Our vouchers would still get submitted to our accounts payable specialist / deputy clerk.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to leave that. We're going to leave that the way it is. Let's see. And so now we're towards the bottom of page 26, and that's just changing the administrator office for updating of changes of addresses and things. Notice of absences. Again, it's changing out clerk for administrator. So weather conditions. I did have a question if we wanted to have the closing decisions made by the administrator alone or in consultation with the chair of the board.
In
it seems
consultation.
reasonable to have that. Go ahead.
I think I should be in consultation with the chair of the board. Chair of the board is the elected official of the county. So I think that
right.
needs to be,
That's I was thinking too.
Important.
That was where I was at.
Yep.
Administrator Langert, do you have any thoughts on that one? Or Chair Brewer, do you have any thoughts on that one?
No, I think it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So then we are to the top of page 28. It's just talking about the paycheck stuff, which is now going through the administrator's office, compensation, badges. All of that seems fairly straightforward. So now we're at the top of page 29, and it's just saying that the handbook is present at the administrator's office, not the clerk's office. Okay, and then that second to last paragraph. So I understand that I have the right to terminate my employment at any time for any reason or no reason, and the county retains the same right to terminate my employment at any time as allowed by applicable law, unless I have a written agreement signed by myself and an authorized representative of the Richland County Board stating otherwise. I didn't know if we should change that to administrator or if we leave that at the board. I don't know what exactly these written agreements are. Are they contract? Do we contract with people?
So I would say this should be the county administrator. Sometimes there have been written agreements that may shorten probationary periods. It may give them an extra 2 weeks of vacation if they come in from another job and they're coming in and they're starting new here, but instead of 1 week, they're going to start them out with 2, and there's some things like that I've seen happen in other counties. So I would say that should all be part of the county administrator, if there's some agreement that has to be done.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure. That's why I just put a question in there. Administrator Langert, did you have any thoughts on that one?
I could see this kind of put in place if you're making special, written agreements at the time of employment. My example is the one that you have with myself as the administrator. So,
right.
With this policy kind of being controlled by a body as the finance and personnel, maybe there's you're going to be delegating then some exceptions then to go around it then to an administrator. So it would be minimal because the context of this is really kind of in context of termination and the person essentially not being an at will to leave when they want. So how often that arises, I would think would be pretty
Right.
minimal, and there would be communication about it coming from myself or any future administrator.
Okay. So we should just leave it the way it is, right?
Yeah, either way, I don't foresee this coming up too often. But this, I could see maybe if
Okay.
like we go down the road, if we're going down the road and putting in a new, we're putting in a new, say a new ERP system. So we have a new budgeting system and a new finance software system, and we want to bring in like some type of an expert on like a limited term employment, and we're really, we're employing this person at certain rates, but we're expecting them to be there for the entire completion of a project. Then there might be a situation where you're entering types of agreement languages, and then they would not be at will, perhaps without some types of penalties that you could put in that language for them to leave. So there may be future situations like it, but I don't know of any other kind of than myself at the moment
And
where
in
it's
those situations, you would want to be or it would be best to have you as the representative, or? Well, actually, it just says, and an authorized representative of the Richland County Board, which we could designate as you in that case, if that were appropriate.
Yeah. When it comes up, I don't know. Without having a history on
Right.
trying to work with this language, it's hard to kind of say what you want it to do.
Yeah, I know
Okay. So,
from the sheriff's department side that we've had some of these contracts where we'd send people to training and then say you have to stay at the department X number of years because we put in the extra time and effort into training. I don't know if other agencies do that for the health department.
yeah, that's true.
or
Because otherwise,
anything.
if they leave, they have to pay it back, right? The
Right,
cost of the
right.
training.
Right. So
Yeah,
who's going to
that's
sign
true.
off on those? That's why I'm thinking this should be the county administrator who knows about it, gets informed about it, and does an agreement with them.
So,
Sure.
so we should change it to county administrator.
Well, that's my 2 cents.
I don't have an opinion either way, honestly. I think we should do whatever makes the most sense as far as streamlining things. And, obviously, that's a good example, though. And I know there's other departments that have done that where they, send new, like Pine Valley, I think they give bonuses and have plan on bonuses, and they've done other things. But then they say, well, you have to stay for so long.
Right. That's what I'm reading into this is that's that kind of side agreement.
Right.
And I don't know who at the county board be.
Okay, so should we just change that we can change that to county administrator, and then we can send this to when we send this document out to department heads and to finance and personnel, they can see what they think of it at that
Sure.
point. All right, so Clint, go ahead and change that county board to county administrator. Unless anyone has objections to that.
The only comment I'd like to make is that a lot of these, and I'm not sure it's applicable here, we get requests from other government agencies all the time. Well, not all the time, but frequently. And they require my signature as the authorized county representative. And in the past, Victor, now we would switch that to county administrator, I believe. So I'm not sure that's what we're talking about here, but I can see that. For instance, when child support, we get a grant, they require my signature. And it's pretty specific as to who they want in that signatory blank, so.
And that grant has to go through county board for approval, and one of the items on the approval is authority to sign, correct?
Right, correct.
So that's where your authority becomes in that document.
The resolution.
Right.
Yeah.
So, just.
Something to keep in mind. Yeah.
One way or the other.
I mean, we'll be talking about this again at finance, and so I think we'll have time to kind of think about this a little bit more, and and maybe the department heads may know situations, you know, they're obviously aware of which situations they have where they have employees with these kind of written agreements. So we can also get their input as well. So I guess I'm still going to say let's go ahead and make the change, and then let's just see what happens through the next few steps of this review.
Right.
Okay. I think that takes us, other than changing at the last sentence to giving a copy to the county administrator instead of the clerk, I think that gets us through this whole document.
Good plowing.
So looking at the time, I guess I would defer to the committee. I was thinking of skipping the addenda for right now and number 6 and going to number 7. And then we'll schedule another meeting where we'll tackle all of the addenda and the committee structure document. If that sounds right. The addendas are much shorter, so I think between that and the committee structure document, it shouldn't be too, we should be able to handle them in one meeting. Is that agreeable to the rest of the committee?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So item number 7. So I've had numerous discussions with Administrator Langrick about how to handle this administrative support staff for him. And I guess I'm just going to give you the gist of what I think he wants at this point, and then obviously I'll let him speak for himself. But I just wanted to start out the conversation. So in discussions with him, yes.
Madam Chair, I did put together a document here this morning to kind of go through it with a summary and a proposal and kind of a report. It did not arrive in
what we've talked about.
With what we've talked about and further thoughts based on our discussion that we've had. So I have a document.
So do you want me to just turn it over to you now, and you can just handle the whole thing?
Sure, if you'd like me to jump into it, and then if they're contradictory thoughts based on our conversation, then I would expect you to call me out on them.
I will do that. Okay, that sounds good. You go ahead.
Sure, and I apologize, Madam Chair, if you're not going to be able to see this, because I didn't get it put into the committee folder until 15 minutes prior to the meeting. So I will talk through it.
I'm actually looking at my iPad, so I should be able to find it.
Okay. So this is discussion with Administrator Langrick on administrative staff support. Recommendation today in action language. There will be no action, discussion only. Individual supervisors may request future items based off discussion. The background on this item, and let me share it here. I'm sorry. I was sharing. There we go. Okay. Is it on there now? Can you see me? Is it on, where is it at?
Yeah.
Yep, sir.
Got it.
Is the document shared? Okay. The background on this item is by resolution number 20-126. The committee is tasked to evaluate staffing levels across all departments in the county to identify what staff, if any, can be moved from other departments to the county administrator's office. As such, I've been asked to share with the committee my thoughts on the current workload facing the administrator position and propose solutions in adjusting staffing to help manage communications, coordination, discussion points, production, etc. Like most organizational situations, there are many complexities and variables that impact the situation. So overall structure, I'd like to, and breaking this kind of down, the first kind of pillar of it that I'd like to kind of talk about is the organizational structure. So the Richland County administration is currently organized with the administrator position description that encompasses administrative duties, financial manager or controller type duties, HR personnel director type duties, and building manager and maintenance engineer type duties that you may see on other county type position descriptions. And without it's kind of a brevity then on the different aspects. And again, these are kind of pulled off and summarized from the Richland County administrator position description. In trying to illustrate the position based on the current structure, the duties, the expectations of production, and the communications and responses, it kind of looks a little bit like this, where you have a county board at top. There's directives and reporting to finance and personnel. From there, that kind of sub goes down to this group is the Administrator Transition Committee. On the right, you see kind of property, Tri-County Airport, and Rules Committee is kind of the three main ones, and two kind of smaller time intensive committees right now that the position is responding to. With finance, HR, and maintenance kind of duties kind of tagged into the position, it kind of puts the administrator position as a, you know, the hat of being administrator over the different departments assigned, as well as then kind of department head duties of managing day-to-day operations with finance, HR, and helping with building maintenance and those types of decisions. So the current structure of the administrator position combined with duties, production needs, and communications impacts the following based on the volume: the ability to get more involved with department operations as organizational administrative leader, the time to dedicate to the evaluation and supervision of department heads, the ability to support department projects and provide timely counsel, the ability to fully serve as a department head to the daily financial functions, daily HR payroll functions, and daily maintenance functions, the ability to keep the committee items, ability to keep up with committee items and requests, the ability to plan and manage the annual budget process and develop capital planning process, the ability to keep up with daily inquiries from departments, supervisors, partners, and citizens, the ability to keep focus on the strategic goals adopted by the county board, the ability to plan and implement structural changes and improvements, the ability to coordinate and prepare materials for meetings, the ability to report and communicate to the public through media. So that's kind of the first bit of it when we look at structure and kind of the different volumes and the many kind of different expectations that are currently with the position. The other part of the conversation that we've kind of had is on existing staffing. Over multiple conversations with this group, we've talked about the accounting supervisor. The big question is, can more of the financial manager and controller duties kind of fit into this position? Currently, this position is heavily involved in many of those functions, involving balancing past transactions, entries, and producing present time fund reports for departments. The position is balancing several months of backlogs in preparation for the 2020 audit. The desire for more real-time financial assessments and forecasting may be a future possibility, but at the present, the position is at full capacity in addressing our past transactions and present entries. Other position that we've kind of talked about in managing the volume of expectations is, can we put more HR and benefits functions on the benefits and payroll and benefits specialist position? The position is already heavily involved in many of those functions, involving multiple payrolls each week, responding to employee handbook policy inquiries, responding to benefit inquiries, and providing new employee orientations. Capacity for extensive policy review, changes in timekeeping systems, changes in payroll systems are a challenge because of the volume of time dedicated to the production of payrolls and personnel files changes in a given week. So while we've addressed, there may be opportunity for us to take a look at new payroll and timekeeping systems as well as other entry systems. It becomes a challenge when so many of the hours on a given week have to be devoted to production. It's a challenge to reallocate for planning and for investigation and all those other things and trying to improve the system. Maintenance supervisor position, we talked about, can we add more of the building manager functions to the position? The position heavily is involved with many of the functions, obviously, in providing maintenance services, planning, custodial support, and coordination on project managements. Capacity for extensive forecasting, committee support, and capital planning is time taken away from our daily and routine maintenance and custodial needs. We have to remember that even though it's a maintenance supervisor position, it is one FTE position that is tasked with the daytime maintenance, putting out fires when things break, as well as custodial cleanups when things go amiss. And on top of that, then trying to manage and plan project improvements. We talked about adding administrative staff support. Would adding administrative support staff help? The discussions of adding additional staff to the administrator to the county clerk have previously been discussed, and consensus on the administrator transition committee is that a sharing of staff is more desirable than adding staff at the time. Recommendations from the committee to explore sharing highway staff with additional hours or explore sharing the deputy register or probate position were discussed. Both of these options have not been explored by the fault of the administrator for not making time to connect with a commissioner or the register of probate to date. Support and coordination of meetings and schedules, reviewing agenda summaries, drafting agendas and minutes, and assisting in correspondences, and learning and performing backup of the accounting supervisor and payroll benefits specialist position would be of great value. So my concerns and kind of how we're structured as well kind of go with without a dedicated finance director or department, without a HR director department or billing manager department, or kind of a de facto administration department, with the administrator position kind of acting as a department head at the same time as trying to be an administrator over many departments. The challenge of an administrator tasked with a direct responsibility over the daily functions, payroll, human resourcing functions, and building management functions, is that the position is going to have a biased view, or at a minimum, a perceived biased view, when it comes to personnel and funding allocations to support those operations, because they're directly tasked with them. To say it directly, it's a benefit to me to reappropriate from other departments to support my operational needs that are tasked and assigned to me. So this arrangement for the administrator position becomes less of an objective oversight administrator and more directing resources with organizational perspective. And by consequence of the structure, it kind of becomes a department head competing with appropriations with other departments tasked with giving services to the community. So these challenges and perceptions are potentially surmountable, but I think they need to be recognized in our current structure when we're talking about moving people or adding people. Financial challenges, as we've talked about, Richland County has increased the investment into administration by 90,000 with this or 90,000 plus in the past year with the addition of my position. My question is there a desire from the board to invest more into administration when funding current services is a challenge? My recommendations on a solutions is ideally, and I think as a long-term plan, is that the county steer towards an Iowa County model of a finance director and having an HR director and having those as standalone future department operations, thereby giving the future, when that happens, the county administrator the future ability to kind of be able to look over all the departments versus having to try to wear the hat of administration over all departments, as well as the department head functions of day-to-day management administration. Solution number two, obviously with that being a higher financial concern, solution number two of adding an administrative support position, that may be a way to certainly help. There may also, with that, then be consideration for future administrators to kind of alternate skill sets. If you have an administrator with more of an HR background, perhaps during their tenure, you're more geared at HR functions. And if you decide to change tools, then your next administrator, you try to go with someone more of a financial background and kind of balance back and forth on keeping up with both of those aspects. The third solution potentially is a status quo with consideration for prioritization of efforts. So those are my recommended solutions of consideration in a process that may be appropriate for this body to make as a recommendation for a process. I would recommend with future agenda items, if there is a request for position descriptions that you would like to see and what that would look like, that could be an action that you could take with other agenda items on this agenda today. And then I guess I would recommend, if we're going to make changes that happen through a budget process, that we have future action to recommend through finance and personnel that the administrator incorporate additional position descriptions, and or if it is different departments, into future budget process for consideration. I know that's a lot. I tried my best to try to condense it into a few pages to chew on, but obviously there's a lot of bits and pieces here from multiple conversations with multiple supervisors that have been tried to condense into it. So I would turn it back to yourself, Madam Chair, for any concerns, questions, or comments.
Okay, that was a lot to digest, but thank you. It's very well. It's nice to see it all laid out. One of the things I did want to make sure we talked about today was, and I think you captured it pretty well in your organizational structure paragraph, and then in the existing staff, is that just exactly how much is on your shoulders right now, and how much we keep asking more and more and more. And so I think this is a really good way to visualize the limitations of what one person can actually accomplish. So I guess I think that solution number one in the recommended solutions, is something that we need to, as a county board, be looking at. And I think as part of our strategic plan, these are things that may have come to the forefront in those discussions as well. But that is obviously, like you said, that's a long-term solution. That's not something that's going to happen right away. And so I do think that we really do need to consider the addition of administrative support position as in solution number two. And I think that should be a part of our budget process this year. But at that, so I guess I'll turn it over to any other committee members have comments.
I need to leave now, Melissa, but are you ready to vote? No, I'm not. So
right.
This is all things that we need to think about. But I thank Clint for laying it out so succinctly for us.
Yes.
Clint, would you be able to email that to us?
It's on our iPads. I'm accessing it through the iPad right now.
Where is it at?
It's in the Administrative Transition Committee folder. He added it just right before the meeting.
Okay, so I just need to sync
So
again.
if you refresh your thing, it should pop in there.
Okay.
So I guess my suggestion at this point would be for us to not do any action at this right now, but that's this, and give us some time to digest this document. What I was going to, I think he has summarized it pretty well. I mean, really, in the conversations I've had with him on numerous occasions, Mr. Langrick, it always comes down to we keep piling it on, so there are things that are going to have to give. And so where we can offer the most efficient support, when we talk about having someone just part-time hours here and there, I think he's got concerns that it's, when you're only working with someone a couple of hours a week, it's not very efficient. You end up having to, you could do it quicker yourself is really what it comes down to. And so that having bits and pieces of people helping from other places is really not the most efficient way to really solve this problem. Was someone going to say something?
Yeah, when you're done.
Okay. So I don't disagree with that. I think if we could get someone who is, up to half-time, then it becomes more efficient, where you're dealing with someone for 4 hours a day or something like that, where they have dedicated. But the idea that we could have someone just doing bits and pieces of things in other departments, it might work, but I'm not sure it's really going to be saving him any time in the time it takes to coordinate 3 part-time people doing bits and pieces of things. That doesn't seem like a very reasonable solution. I was going to suggest that what I was going to suggest for this meeting was that if we were going to take action, we could acknowledge that we think that the administrator needs a full-time assistant, and that would be our recommendation. And then we would let the budget process work. He would put that position into the budget process, and we would evaluate it like we did like we do all the other items as far as priority, and see where things fall with how much money we have. So that was going to be my suggestion. I don't think we need to do that today. I think we can look at this document and read a little bit more in depth into this document, and we could have that discussion at the next meeting. So with that, Supervisor Frank, did you have comments?
Yeah, so option 3 I like because of the cost savings. However, it is totally not practical. Option 3.
Right.
So I get that. And I think that's the vision we have of getting things at least through the process. I like option 2. I think it needs to go through the budget process. I think we need to have it very clear that what the process is the money there? How do we handle it? How do we look at the whole picture? And I think that is the direction that we should start pursuing. I think what we've been talking about in the interim stuff of help with, can the highway department help, can these other agencies help, is just that. It's an interim process to get us through into the next budget cycle to see what we can handle.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Glassbender, did you have comments?
Not anything to add to all of that. I agree.
Okay. So I would like to, so as a future agenda item, I would like to see a position description for what you foresee an administrative assistant's job entailing. And I definitely will get you some sample job descriptions from other counties. I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but I will do that, Mr. Langrick. And then I think, so at our next meeting, that would be something that we could, because it is a little hard to talk about what needing a position, but it'd be really nice to see kind of what you're actually looking for and where you really would be able to utilize help, and how that would free up time to prioritize other tasks. So, all right. So now that we've lost Marty, I'm thinking that I would like to adjourn the meeting, and that we will pick up the other items on our agenda at the next meeting. And I think instead of trying to set the date right now, I think we'll just send out. I think it's easier if I send out. We're missing 2 members, so I think I'd rather try to send out a poll to. Sorry, I'm distracted because I'm trying to get my agenda back up. All right. Yeah, so I think I would. Well, I guess I'll go back to item number 8. Does anyone have any other proposed future agenda items?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. So the next agenda would include reviewing the addendums of the employee handbook and reviewing the committee structure documents, and then continuing this discussion about administrative support staff, and potentially including a job description for what that administrative support staff person would look like. All right. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, and we will.
Clint has a question.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I just had one. With item 5, did we want motion to release, or do you want me to I can just take care of it? I'll release it out to departments and have it brought back with the proposed amendments to the handbook.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to bring the handbook back to, my vision was that, I mean, the only thing I'm wondering if we want to wait until the next meeting, and then we'll send the addendums and the handbook together to all of the departments or do we, I don't envision the handbook having to come back to us. What I was envisioning is that we've made our changes, we made our suggestions, you send it to the department heads where they can add input, and then it goes to finance where, I mean, I really think that committee, it's a much bigger committee, and I feel like they would have, that would be the next, does anyone else feel it needs to come back to us before it goes to finance?
No.
No, I think we may discuss it yet as we go through the addendums. We may have some questions to go back and forth, but
yeah. Okay. So, Clint, do you think it makes sense to release the employee handbook to the department heads now, or wait until the addendums are all done? I guess it doesn't matter.
I'd say release it now, get their feedback. If they've got something that they've got concerns that maybe we need to readdress, that'd be fine. But
yeah, and do we want to make a motion then to do that?
Do we need to?
Do we need to?
I mean, it can't hurt. So why don't you go? Yeah, go. It can't hurt. That way he's got clear instructions, right?
I will make a motion that the draft revisions we are making to the handbook be released to the department heads for their review.
All right. So a motion by Supervisor Frank.
I'll
second by Glassbender, was that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Oh, I assume you were in favor?
Yes.
Sorry, there was a little delay.
Your timing was just.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I tried to hold on. All right, so yes, please release the employee handbook to the department heads for their input, Mr. Langrick. All right. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
To a date determined.
I third. Second.
All right.
All right.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Be
All
safe.
right. Yep. Thanks, everybody.